It is great to have you.
Great to be had. So good to finally make this happen. How are you?
Oh, me as an individual? Yeah.
You as an individual human person.
Yeah, I'm doing very well.
Good
Thank
to hear.
you so much for joining us for our Design as a Catalyst for Change class. Super excited to have you. So what do you say?
I was thinking I was going to ask you, in order for us to get started, if you go to my website, if you go to DS4SI and go to the public kitchen page and interventions, there's a video on that link. I thought it'd be a good place for people to look at a project that we've done and then jump in and start talking generically about the studio after we see that video, and then maybe show one more and have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, what I can do is bring up the video on my computer and broadcast it to everyone. And then after it plays, we'll get started. Does that work?
That would be perfect. Just
All
as
right.
a point of departure so they can have a basic sense of how we think and a little bit of what our work looks like.
Mm-hmm. All right, it's gonna look like this for a sec. Yeah.
Infinity.
Yes. Wait. It may be the other option. Just the application window. There we are. All right. And you said go to publication?
Yeah, public kitchen.
Is that under our work?
It should be under interventions. And interventions should be under our work.
Okay. What was the name of it again?
Public kitchen.
Public kitchen.
Creativity labs. Go back.
Go back?
Yeah.
All right, here. Got it.
There it is. Now show that video right there, and then we can start.
We're asking people to imagine if people have access to a shared kitchen, a public kitchen, cooking together, learning about food together, sharing recipes together, how having something like that in your neighborhood might change your life. My name's Kenneth Bailey. I'm one of the founders of the Design Studio for Social Intervention. We're a creativity lab for the social justice sector, and we're incredibly invested in reimagining the contemporary public. We were really interested in public infrastructure, and the public kitchen was our attempt at introducing a new kind of public infrastructure. So like libraries or public schools or buses. We said, what if we had kitchens that were public that people could use collectively, similar to a library? How might that change social life? So we did a 10-day installation in Upham's Corner that explored that. The hub was the central locus of public kitchen, right in the heart of Upham's Corner, next to the Strand Theater. And that's where we had an open space that was open. Connect with other people who found this idea of public kitchen interesting and keep in touch.
For me, the hub was the best part by far, and I'm a huge fan of the public kitchen because I think it really transforms the space, and I think especially in this corner, which is really interesting, reason used to have it. It really gave us opportunity to impact the people. This corner is one of those places where there's not a lot of public space.
So the public kitchen functioned in a variety of ways. We had a mobile public kitchen that actually went around the neighborhood. We had a chef that did cooking demos at community events. And then we had events that happened at other parts of the neighborhood of Upham's Corner. Part of our mission is to make people imagine what they wouldn't have imagined otherwise. And so public kitchen is an imagination project. We're asking people to imagine an infrastructure that doesn't exist and how that infrastructure, if it did exist, would benefit them.
what would you like to see in a public kitchen, or what is important to see in a public kitchen?
A social system where everybody connects.
I love canning with people. One of my favorite moments this summer is doing a canning workshop here at the City Project with neighbors. It's a lot of fun, and I think that would be something I would really love to do.
Cool.
One of the things that people talked about was being able to actually have a commercial kitchen space, an actual venue where people get to experience cutting and I think it's just a great experience.
It's a little voyeuristic. I'm always wondering what's happening in someone's kitchen, or like what that smell is that I'm smelling. Especially my neighbor. I think I'm just gonna actually knock on their door. They're always making something good.
There is a real desire across walks of life to connect around food. Just the range of people that came together around issues of food for the variety of different reasons that they did were incredible. And there's a lot of power there. Like there's a lot of untapped. It changed our relationship to the public, and it changed our relationship to each other through these kinds of gestures, these kinds of endeavors like these.
Sweet deal.
Thank you.
No, thank you. That was awesome to kick things off with. Yeah. All right.
So how do you want to do the next bit? You want to just take questions? You want me to talk a little bit more? What do you want?
Yeah.
How do you want?
If you could share a little bit about your journey from being from St. Louis and navigating to Boston and starting your practice.
Okay, that would be fun. So I grew up in a place in St. Louis called Cochran Gardens. It doesn't exist anymore. It was downtown St. Louis. And it was there that I really started to think about place and think about race and think about inequity. And I grew up in St. Louis, went to high school in St. Louis, went to Metro. I love St. Louis. And I thought I would stay there to do this kind of, well, I didn't even know about this kind of work when I was there. I thought I'd stay there and become an organizer, but a lot of my mentors at the time, this was like mid 80s, were like, in order to do good work at home, you got to leave. So I was part of that generation that was told to go somewhere else in order to make a name for yourself versus trying to make a name for yourself at home. And little did I know that I would find myself never making it back home. That wasn't in the cards, but that's how time happens. And so I moved to Minneapolis and took a job as a student organizer, and from there went to not Chicago to Boston, where I am now. And it was the early 90s, and Boston was a really robust place to work from. So I didn't have to really think about work or finding opportunities. They just kept appearing, and that was one of the reasons why I'm still here now. But it was more just that time in life than it had to do with, I think, place. But Boston was really good to me, and how I really came to understand design as a way to do this work was I'd been doing consulting in the nonprofit sector for coming from Minneapolis. I started doing consulting inside of like nonprofits probably in like 99. Before that, I did a lot of community organizing, but around 99, 2000, I switched to consulting and just learned a lot about the problems with creativity and imagination. Like a lot of the solutions that people were coming up with to make their communities better actually they were inconsistent with the dreams or desires they had for their community. So I could see a mismatch between intention and impact, or intention and what got deployed. And and I wanted to understand why that was. Like, how is it that people could want to accomplish one thing but do things that that contradicted the things they wanted to accomplish? And so I did a mid-career fellowship at MIT, and that's why I really stumbled onto design. And that design sort of gives you a way to surface the connection between form and function, or intention and action, and
Kenny,
thought. Yes.
You broke up a little bit. Would you be willing to repeat what you just said about design?
Oh yeah, I said that one of the insights I had when I was consulting is, before I started the design studio, was that I could see a big gap between what people wanted to accomplish through coming up with like programs, and what they would put on the ground in terms of what they actually programmed. That there was a gap between intention and sort of design. Really, there was a gap between what they wanted a design to do versus what they designed a thing to do. So you might be interested in youth empowerment, but design a program that didn't empower young people. So, or you might be interested in trying to build a better neighborhood, but design your intervention or design your program in a way that kept people separated. So, but the literacy in communities around what you deploy and how that then shows up, how that thing can belie or support your intentions, to me was fairly low. And I was interested in trying to create a space to help people better understand how the things we create actually line up with our intentions. And so I went and did a mid-career fellowship at MIT, sort of asking questions around how do you design, like, not, I didn't even have the word design yet. I was asking questions like, how do you reconcile the difference between having an idea and then doing something that lines up with that idea? That was the language I basically had at the time. And I met a guy who was also doing a mid-career fellowship who told me that a lot of my questions I was asking exist in the realm of design and design thinking. And this is around 99 when this is happening, 99, 2000. And so I went and did a quick student, like, I got to sit in some of the design labs up at MIT, and the one I chose was the new car design lab, and got to talk to a lot of the professors there. And that's when I really learned about divergent thinking, design as a methodology, not an identity. Methodologies need to be deployed in order to get people to do these kind of things, and those to really think designerly. And those methodologies can be generically invented, but you have to sort of tweak them for whatever context you're designing within. And so I had a background, because I was doing consulting, I had a background in methodology development. So it was fairly easy to take sort of corporate industrial design based design thinking and really imagine it for the civil society sector and find its holes, and sort of make a methodology that makes sense for the work we're doing now. And so that took about 2.5 years, and the studio is about 10 now. We kicked it off around 2003, 2004, or maybe it was a little later than that, when we got our first sort of major grant, and we've been around ever since. And we really exist to be a space that helps social justice programs understand how to imagine new, creative, interesting ways to create the changes that they're interested in creating, and how to recognize when the things they might have done already might not actually line up with what they were hoping for, sort of to become design literate.
Awesome. So Kenny, with all the work that you do, like with going to your website, there is so much. What have been for you some of the things that you've had to reconcile in practice as it relates to the work that you're doing and your own identities, your own intersections, and those, of course, of people on your team.
I don't know how to answer the question. Ask it a different way, and I can see if I can figure out an answer.
In what ways have you had to challenge your own assumptions or your own ways of navigating as a human in this work?
Oh, got it.
Have there been people who, because you are who you are, who've been resistant to working with you, or?
Oh yeah, totally. I get it. Totally get it. So for the first, because we were kind of on the front end of this whole design for social change and trying to use design to tackle civil society questions, we got met with a lot of resistance. Like I feel like we really were part of the wave of folk that sort of made it possible for people to talk about design and social change. Like when we started it was like we were just talking a foreign language to people. Like nobody understood what we were saying, and they kept wanting us to fit into a strategic planning box or a evaluation box, or a lot of other methodologies already existed. So it was a really strong it took a lot out of us to really stick with our guns and sort of keep moving forward, regardless of the kind of pushback that we got. Like I would say from the first 3 years of the studio, if it hadn't been for the sort of willingness to experiment that youth organizing and youth development practitioners had, we wouldn't have existed. That field was the field that really was the first one to say, we really do need some new sort of approaches to how we're dealing with problems, and we're willing to sort of go there with you. If it hadn't been for that field, I don't think we would have made it.
Cool. I want to see if there are any questions from any students. Rachel.
Hi. I was wondering if you see a future in the morphing of nonprofit / policy work and design in the same space, or instead of being design firms and then nonprofits, if they would ever be the same thing, or if you think it's more design informing nonprofits and policy.
I don't know. The way I'm hearing your question is, do I see there being a point to where design thinking will get so incorporated in nonprofits that nonprofits will have their own design arm? If that's the question, if I'm hearing the question right, what I think is more likely to happen for the next 10 years or so is we'll probably have more of a proliferation of design for social change sort of outfits before we see design arms opening up inside of nonprofits, where I do think we will see design get picked up faster. Well, if at all, it will probably be inside of foundations. I could imagine foundations starting to look at design the same ways that they look at evaluation, and saying we want to have our own design criteria and start to ask those kind of questions at the foundation level. But just given the way funding is in a lot of ways sort of shrinking on the ground, I think what we'll see is that design firms will grow, but people who are running policy tanks or direct programming will stick to their guns and try to hire in design expertise when necessary. And I also have to say that although the design sort of world is starting to grow and we have more people understanding design for social change, I still don't think we've hit a tipping point. it still isn't part of the common lexicon inside of the nonprofit sector or inside of the social change sector to think designerly. We haven't crossed the bridge yet.
Any others? Maya.
Hi. So knowing that you are from St. Louis and perhaps in the future or in another life would have returned or will return, how has your practice shed new light on maybe your past or the future of St. Louis specifically?
Oh my God! Now you make me want to come home. We tried to do the project that we just showed you. We got really, really close to doing that project with a network of people at home. But at the end of the day, it didn't come through Pulitzer. We were going to do a PK with Pulitzer. A lot of the people that typically take up design studio projects right now, still, it's like a half and half between social justice networks that understand what we're trying to do and art and social change networks in the museum and public art world. So we sort of function between what some people call social practice and this whole sort of art and social life realm, and then helping people imagine new solutions to problems in the social justice sector. And so I think one of the one of the insights I think that we've developed or we've had since we started the studio that I think is really relevant to how to think St. Louis and how to design St. Louis, I think, is it's some after we do the call, when you get a chance, we have a paper on our website called Spatial Justice, and it's a framework for right to be, thrive, express, connect. I feel like a lot of what we're dealing with in St. Louis has to do with race and space, and how space gets conceived of. I feel like that paper sort of has a lot of insights that could be thought through in St. Louis. I feel like a lot of the work that we did with young people 3 years ago around, not 7, 8 years ago now, around youth violence is useful for how to think St. Louis. And this project I want to end with you guys, this immediate project we're working on right now called Social Emergency Response Centers, I think are all sort of relevant to the kinds of things we're doing in St. Louis. But ideally, like in terms of having fun, I'd love to come back and do like a southern, like, sort of St. Louis local food version of PK, which would be a blast. So roundabout way of answering your question.
Sweet deal. All right. Well, I don't know. I don't think there are any more questions, but I wanted to make sure we respect your time. Oh, was there one? One more. We have one more question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, totally. And after I take the question, I just ask you guys to do two things. If you get a chance to look at the Social Emergency Response Center video and look at our spatial justice paper, I'll take the question.
That to our class. Eva.
I was wondering, what do you see the intersection between activism and design in terms of what, activism principles inform your design, or how, being a designer informs, being a better activist?
So the way we created the space is the design studio exists to bring activists into thinking like designers. So we primarily do workshops and create opportunities to get designers to look at to see.
Oh yeah. Uh-oh. We're gonna